Thank you for joining us for the 2021 Virtual Southern Home and Garden Show virtual presentation. Today we have Alicia Allen talking about herbs. We would like to thank our sponsors, the Pulaski Lions Club, Bankston Motorhomes, Big Creek Winery, Blue Line Pressure Washing Services, Bull on the Run, Farm Bureau, Five Stone Landscaping, Giles County Co-op, Haney Realty and Property Management, Pulaski Electric Company, Pilot Maintenance, Tri-Green Equipment, the Giles County Chamber, and UTTSU Extension Giles County. Be sure to check out all of our vendors also. We have All American Gutter Protection, Aspen Hill Growers, Butcher Drafting, Columbia Kubota, Flowers Creamery, Georgia's Quilts, Guardian Garage Floors, Kathy G Creations, Lane Roofing, and Inglet Leaf Guard.
Why should we grow herbs? Well, they are fun to grow. They smell good. They make our food taste better. They actually provide a lot of nutrition in a small amount of food. They can have very attractive flowers. They draw pollinators, and overall, they're just a nice plant to have around, or plants to have around. How do you know which ones you want to grow? Well, if you want to add herbs to your cooked foods, like your meats and your veggies, then you want to probably start with the Mediterranean type herbs. One, they're easy to grow, and two, they go into a lot of the cooking that we do. Oregano and rosemary, tarragon, and thyme are some easy ones to start with. What if you want to primarily use your herbs in uncooked foods? You just want to go grab them and start using them every day. Well, some ones that you might want to start with are chives, which are mild onion-like flavor, basil, and parsley. And in this picture, there are two kinds of parsley: the Italian flat-leaf parsley, which is your more flavorful, and your curled parsley, which is a very attractive plant and can even be used in plantings with flowers and vegetables and other things like that. And we'll talk about that in a minute. What if you're looking for things to spice up your drinks, or you want to do something different with your sweets? Well, you might want to consider growing spearmint, lemon thyme, or my favorite, cinnamon basil. Cinnamon basil is what got me started enjoying basil, because for the life of me, I couldn't figure out what you would want to do with basil. And I grew cinnamon basil one year because it was pretty, and I added it to my unsweet tea, and I was hooked. And now basil of all kinds is one of my favorite herbs. What if you want to specifically make herbal teas? You might want to consider something a little bit different. The Roselle hibiscus is the base for red zinger tea. It's got a lot of vitamin C in it, and it's kind of a cranberry taste. It's very, very good just by itself, to either add to unsweet black tea or green tea, or just to make it an herbal tea. Peppermint makes a good herbal tea, and chamomile, I'm sure that you're familiar with that as an herbal tea. What if you just want to grow the herbs to make a pretty garden? There are a lot of herbs that make a very attractive appearance and are also good pollinators, so it's kind of a win-win. But chives has a very pretty flower when it flowers in the spring. Bee balm flowers in the summer. Globe basil is a particularly small leaf basil that makes a round, compact plant. And some of the ones for ground covers you might consider are golden oregano. It's the same as oregano. It just has a lime green, yellow green kind of color. Silver thyme, which has a lemony taste, and red creeping thyme, when it's blooming, and it doesn't bloom all year, but when it's blooming, it makes a very attractive ground cover. What if you want to grow a garden for children or for the young at heart? There, you can make a theme garden. For example, what I've represented here are fruit named herbs and fruit scented herbs. On the far left is lemon basil. Below that is pineapple mint. Next to that, with the hummingbird, is pineapple sage. That blooms in the fall and makes a very, very nice, tall, fall blooming perennial. Next to the pineapple sage is orange mint. And then you have lime basil. And below that is variegated lemon thyme. It's another version of lemon thyme other than the silver thyme that as fruit. You also have banana mint and apple mint and lavender thyme and just so many scented things. Or you could do a pizza themed garden. You could do all the herbs that go on pizza, like, or in pizza sauce. One of the beds that I did at the children's garden at the botanical gardens in Huntsville was an insect and animal themed. I had, of course, you have the bee balm and hummingbird mint and lamb's ear and things like that for that. You could do a lemon scented bed. There are enough lemon scented herbs, lemon balm, lemon verbena, lemon basil, lemon thyme, and a few others that you can make. There's even a lemon mint. It's a little hard to find, but you can find it. That can make a really nice lemon scented bed. And like I said, it's especially fun to have a themed bed like that for children or grandchildren to enjoy. So consider a herb-themed garden. What if you just want to grow plants that are different? Well, there again, there's an herb for that. There is, well, that's actually lemon verbena. I see when I was copying and pasting and renaming, I forgot to name the lemon verbena. So the far left one is lemon verbena, which is the most lemon scented herb, by the way. It's good to put in drinks that you just leave it whole on the stem. It's not so good to put in baking because it's the leaves are thicker and stiffer, so it doesn't do as well when you want to chew it. But if you're just having it in a liquid or making a scented syrup or a scented sugar, you would want to use your lemon verbena. The anise hyssop next to that also, it's called hummingbird mint, has some very beautiful cultivars, as well as the standard cultivars, pretty on their own. On the bottom is salad burnet. It's a really inconspicuous little mound of an herb, but it's really good in salads, and it's a substitute for cucumber. It's a cucumber scented or tasting herb. One of my favorite herbs are scented geraniums. These come from South Africa originally, and they come in a wide multitude of scents. They're good to make herbal sugars. They're often placed on the bottom of a cake pan and your batter poured on top of that, as well as mincing it very finely to go into your baked goods. And then when you turn your cake out, you just simply peel off the leaves and the flavor's been infused. But again, these leaves are a little thicker and don't do as well when you try to mince them and hide them in foods. But you can get, my favorite is a rose scented geranium. And I love to make an herbal sugar with a rose scented geranium and use it in to flavor drinks or to use in my baked goods that way. And to make an herbal sugar, you take 1 to 2 cups of sugar and you simply layer the herbs in there. You don't put a lot of green material with the sugar because you want the oils to be absorbed by the sugar, but you don't want the too much moisture in the sugar. So maybe a 1/4 cup of herbs to 2 cup of sugar. And when you're layering them or mixing them with the sugar, before you do that, you want to bruise the leaves. You don't necessarily want to cut up the leaves. You can, but if you want to take the leaves out when they're dried and the oils have been transferred to the sugar, you simply bruise them, which means smash them between your fingers or roll them with a rolling pin or smash them with a meat cleaver or something to simply bruise those leaves so that the oils are better released. A good shade-loving herb that is good for adding to sweets and drinks that a lot of people are not familiar with is sweet woodruff. It's one of the few herbs that will grow in a deeper shade than most herbs will. And of course, excuse me, most people have heard of lemongrass, but they may not have grown it. And lemongrass, you normally use the roots, the bulbs, the inside stem to mince and add to dishes. A lot of times Asian dishes, but there's a lot of cooking you can do that is not Asian. Also, you can use the leaves to make teas and to, again, make herbal sugars. And so you don't have to waste them either. Excuse me. So how do you grow your herbs? Well, first thing is light. Most herbs need 6 hours of full sun to be the best. That doesn't mean you can't grow them with less light. They just may not grow as fast or as full. If you do grow something in less light than it prefers, then you can cut it regularly to make it come back fuller. A lot of herbs don't want a lot of water because they're from the Mediterranean region and they're used to drier conditions. They want to dry out between waterings. But you need to be cautious because that's not true with all herbs. Parsley likes more water. Mint likes more water. So you have to know a little bit about the herbs that you're growing to understand how best to water them. And so therefore, how you group them in your garden will depend on their water needs as well. All herbs like well-drained soil. They don't like to have their feet wet. There are a tiny few exceptions, and on an upcoming slide we'll go to those, but most do not like wet feet. They want to absorb the water immediately and then have the soil dry up around their roots. This is another because of the water issues, that's another reason you don't mulch around herbs, is to keep the soil, to let the soil dry and not keep the top of the soil moist most of the time. Since you're going to be eating the actual plant itself, you want to grow organic as much as possible. There are a lot of herbs grown by commercial growers are sprayed with neonicotinoids. And those, the debate is out how if they're harmful and how harmful they might be to humans, but they definitely impact our pollinators. And since herbs are good pollinators, if you can avoid herbs that have been treated with neonicotinoids, you'll be better off, and so will our world. I saw recently where a big box retailer has started labeling which herbs they carry that have been treated with neonicotinoids. So it's going to be easier, I hope, to be able to tell simply by looking at the plant. And again, going with the fact that you're going to eat these, you want to fertilize with compost or other natural fertilizers. I have a friend who grows medicinal herbs on a large scale, and she uses a fish emulsion. And others I know use mushroom compost, and some purchase compost and fertilizer and actual granular fertilizers, but they're all natural ingredients. So if you can, choose natural. As I said, some herbs do tolerate more shade than others. Parsley, lemon balm, chives, thyme, mints, as I said, and sweet woodruff. And as I mentioned before, to make them less leggy, cut them back regularly. I did tell you that there are a few things that will tolerate a wet spot. Mints, bee balms, marshmallow, which is where marshmallows were originally made from, the mucilage of the roots of the marshmallow plant, and comfrey, believe it or not, will tolerate a wet spot. There's a lot of information on making herb gardens and a lot of herb garden designs out there, but I want to talk on herb gardening in containers, because a lot of us don't have the space or the time, no pun intended, to make an in-ground herb garden. And for those of us, we can garden successfully with a little planning if we garden in containers. It can be as simple as simply placing several pots together with a different herb in each pot. Or on the other end of the scale, you can make an herb planting that is attractive enough to be a planter on your front porch. If you plant it carefully with height considerations, bloom considerations, and another tip is to cut them back regularly so that they stay lower and fuller if you're going to put it in a container that's going to be visible, highly visible. Recently, actually yesterday, I received my newest version of Fine Gardening, and guess what? There's an article in there on adding herbs to mixed containers, and it shows you several examples over several pages of how to grow herbs in baskets with flowers and plants, and just use the herbs as an attractive plant rather than just a culinary herb garden. So that's something you might want to check out in Fine Gardening. When you do make a planting of all herbs, you want to make sure that the herbs have the same requirements. This one has Mediterranean herbs in it, as you can see, oregano and thyme and sage and marjoram, and they all have the same sunlight, soil requirements. So they'll be successful in this growing. But not all rules are made to be followed. This picture was not, picture was made years ago and it wasn't made for this presentation. That's why you just see half of the pot. But this was a planter that I had for several years that broke all the rules. It had sage, a dry herb, chives, a more moist herb, thyme, and strawberries. It was in a thin plastic pot. I left it out on the deck all winter on the north side of the house, and it stayed and grew and produced for several years until one year we had a really deep freeze. I did add compost, which is how I treat my herb gardens, is I add compost, working compost to the soil every year. That's how I choose to fertilize mine. So even though there are rules to be followed, if there's some things you really want, you might get away with breaking a few, but just don't be surprised if it doesn't work. Another way to take container gardening to a different level is stacked pots. And these are two different stacked pot versions that I have had in years past and still have, actually. The one on the right has deteriorated. The clay pots have been victim of the weather over the years, but for several years it was pristine and perfect, and it was my favorite planting. But these both have a steel rod up through the center, and on the left, the steel rod is driven into the ground. On the right, it was a purchased rod that has a small metal square welded on the bottom of it that goes inside the big pot. So you can find those sometimes even at big box stores. Another type of container gardening taken to a different level is a raised bed. This could be also called a square foot gardening, in the way that the plants are laid out. You will notice that they have their mint in pots because mint is very invasive, and even in a raised garden, it can take over everything. Well, in a raised garden, in an in-ground herb garden, you want to have your mint herbs in pots. One of the more well-known methods of a space-saving herb garden is an herb spiral. What this does is it provides microclimates from a Mediterranean garden on the top all the way down to a more moist environment on the bottom. And where the pot of flowers is often a little small pond where watercress or mint or other water-loving or tolerant herbs are grown. That's not always featured in an herb spiral, but oftentimes it is. To make an herb, this is about 6 feet in diameter. And plug here, Matthew Allen, who is my son who's on this call, I am suggesting that you might consider this for your garden that you're building.
I was just thinking that when you were presenting this.
To make an herb spiral, you can simply pile up cardboard and old limbs and degradable debris in the center. You don't have to make dirt all the way to the ground. In fact, it's a more permaculture type environment if you don't. If you add the biodegradable elements to the center, and then just add soil as those degrade. In fact, one of an more excellent ways to make an herb spiral is to center it over an old stump, and that will very slowly degrade and provide additives to the soil. Another space-saving herb garden or mixed garden is a keyhole garden. This garden was developed as a way to allow African gardeners to utilize the materials they had on hand and to grow food in a very small space. As you can see, it can make a very attractive garden feature. Typically, they're 5 to 10 feet in diameter, and they have one distinguishing feature for them is in the very center, they have a compost pile. You put a wire circle or column in the center, and you put compost in it, and it enriches the soil. Again, you don't start with soil all the way to the ground. You can use cardboard, old newspapers, and limbs and other yard debris to make the at least, you know, a percentage of the height on your keyhole garden. One thing that I really like about a keyhole garden is it is a way for someone in a wheelchair to be able to garden. If you make the entrance wide enough, as this one is almost, for a wheelchair to get in, then you can have access to it all the way around. And you could grow your herbs and your vegetables together. This one is, and it's very hard to see, and so I'll go to the next one, which is a bird's eye view. You can have like a trellis or something to have vines to grow up over it. But see, this is sort of telling you how to build up a keyhole garden. And again, it's a lot of gardening space in a very small amount, and it can make it easier for those of us who have a hard time bending down to the ground. And I think I said these are usually about 6 to 10 feet as well. So this is just some information, and this is going to be recorded so you could go back and look at this. This has got some information on how to build it. How do I know when it's time to harvest my herbs? That's a good question. So I've captured the key points in some sayings. The first one is good morning, and how do you do? Go out and greet your herbs in the morning, and that's the best time to pick your herbs before the temperatures get hot, when they've cooled all night and the oils are in the leaves at their highest levels in the morning. No more dewy complexion. I'm sorry, but the herbs may just not be as pretty when the dew dries, but that is when you want to harvest them. Unless you're going to use it immediately, you don't want to pick herbs that still have the dew on them and go and set them aside to deal with later. You want them to be dry. Let's make this a joint effort. Some herbs like basil that grow with different stems coming out, you want to cut a stem of basil and similar growing herbs at that joint, just above where two shoots might be coming out, and the single stem is going up in the center, that's where you want to cut it. And there's more information on this, a picture in some of the presentations that I recorded as mini promos for this, and I'll talk about those at the end. I see you, Buddy, and Buddy being the operative word here. The best time to harvest your herbs, if you're going to do a massed harvest, is just before they flower. When you start seeing the buds of the flowers, you know that that's when their flavor is at their best. Hey, save some for later. When you are harvesting part of a plant and you're not wanting to kill it, usually you want to leave 2/3 and just cut the top third down. Sometimes you can like a thyme or some things that have a lot of single stems, you can cut, and cilantro is a good one, and parsley. You can cut the outer leaves. Just take no more than 1/3 is one way to do it. I'm going to say there is a difference on cilantro, though. Cilantro can bolt very easily, and how to avoid that is to grow several plants at once, shear the whole plant, leaving about at least a half to 1/3 of the plant, and use that cilantro. Next time, do the same thing to the next plant, and so on. And when by the time you come back to that first plant, it will have regrown. So cilantro, and that will keep it from bolting. So instead of taking a few leaves from each of your cilantro plants, shear the whole plant one at a time, and that will keep them in a constant growing state and keep them from bolting. Okay, now you've grown these herbs, you've harvested them, but what the heck do you do with all those? That's the easy part. You eat. Again, there were 5 presentations that will be released by Darby that are focuses on specific herbs, and they will give you individual ideas for like how to use basil every day, how to use mint regularly, and in quick uses. And they also include, for each of the 5 herbs that have the individual presentations, they include a special recipe for how to highlight that herb. But with any herb, drink it, add it, make an herbal tea, make an infused water. The one shown here is basil, spearmint, and lemon. But and I have a special one that I like to take to hoity-toity herbal gatherings that always gets a lot of raves. It's lemon verbena, spearmint, lemon balm, pineapple sage, and basil. Cinnamon basil if I have it, but basil. And that makes a delicious additive, no sugar needed, to your iced tea. Herbs are also very good in lemonades. So, and also cocktails. If you enjoy cocktails, herbs take them to the next level. Toss herbs with your fruit salad or just a single fruit. An apple with a little mint sprinkled on it, strawberries and basil are easy to do, and you can do it today. Same thing with your vegetables. Take your vegetables, whether you roast them in the oven or saute them or boil them. You can add an herb either during the cooking or when it's finished, such as these carrots with parsley or thyme or tarragon. You can add it to your entrees and your casseroles. This is a chicken with rosemary and thyme on it. You can press them into these are purchased biscuits, and it's just simply sage leaves pressed into that with a little butter brushed on the biscuit before, a little before and after the sage leaves are added. You can add them to your breads, such as a scone. This is a dill and cheddar scone. Take refrigerated cookies from the grocery store and press minced basil or lemon thyme into the cookie. Bake them as you would normally, and then add a lemon glaze, and it's delicious. The top left is a basil and blueberry galette, which is a small tart. Add them to dips, either store-bought dips or dips that you make yourself. Just a little sour cream, an herb or two, and maybe a little chopped onion or a little garlic, and you've got a wonderful addition to cut vegetables. Bottom line, have a good time and enjoy your herbs. Pun intended. Do you need more? Would you like to see more sessions like this, maybe focusing more on things to do with your herbs other than cook with them, or highlights on particular herbs? Tell Darby, and she can work something out with me or with someone more knowledgeable than me, I'm sure. There's also a local Facebook group called the Wolf Gap Herb Enthusiasts. We started this last year with we started talking about it about a year and a half, 2 years ago, with the intent of having a local herb group, and then COVID hit. So for the most part, it has been a Facebook group. There's a lot of information on it. We did go to the farmers market a couple of times, and ultimately we would like to go out and work in the beds at Wolf Gap, which is what our collaboration is with Wolf Gap, is to hopefully do demonstration beds there. So if you'd like to know more about that, you can get in touch with Darby or Myra Walker or me. You want something more detailed or more information that you can keep, reference. There are a lot of herb publications out there. One of my favorite is the Essential Herbal magazine. I like it because it has more in-depth information than some of the others, and I like it so much that I contribute to it. I write an article. It comes out 4 times a year, and I usually have one in there, and I have for the last couple of years. There are also lots of great books out there. Some of my favorites are the Cook's Herb Garden, Grow Your Own Herbs, the Herb Farm Cookbook, and Herbal Sweets. I added Grow Your Own Herbs, even though you may not have seen much by this author, but she is a well-known herbalist, and she's excellent. Her work is excellent. Her name is Susan Belsinger, and so you might look up some of the books that she has written. I have had the pleasure of meeting her and getting to talk with her about her books, and I find her very helpful. Well, that's it. I hope that you have found something informative and useful, and I hope that I've inspired you just a little bit to grow some herbs. Does anybody have any questions? Are there any on chat, Darby?
You had one in chat. Miss Maggie asked, what do you think growing herbs in clay strawberry pots with lots of openings? What do you think about those?
I think that is fine if you choose herbs that grow well together. If some of the promo presentations that Darby's going to release talk about companion planting, for example, basil, what grows well with basil, what doesn't. So that's one thing to consider, is what herbs grow well together. Another thing to consider is what kind of roots do they have. If you're growing in a strawberry pot, you mostly will want shallow rooted herbs like thymes and well, sorry to say mint, but only if you want your whole pot to be mint. You might could put a basil in the top, because one thing about basil is it has a very long root. It needs a 15 to 18 inch pot to be happy, and a deep pot. So if you try to grow it sideways in a small strawberry pot, it probably won't be really happy, even though the roots will try to go down, but it won't have a long way to go down or a long way to go sideways either.
Alicia,
Yes.
this is Lois.
Hey.
Hey, if I want to use some of my rosemary plant, do I trim it from the top, or do I take a long sprig, or what's the best way to actually cut from a rosemary plant?
Take it from the top.
Okay.
You can take it from the bottom, but it will hurt the plant less if you just take like maybe the top third or fourth.
Okay. Good to know. Thank you. Enjoyed the
Uh-huh.
presentation.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
I hate it you missed the one-pan dinners with herbs at the senior center. I'll have to give that someplace else. And
Yeah, I heard good things about it. Sonia
well, good.
told me about it.
Thank you.
We'd
Thank
like
you.
to have you come back. I would like for them to see this particular presentation. Is that possible?
I'd be glad to.
Okay.
I always enjoy talking about herbs.
Okay. That's good. We'd like to have you back.
All right.
Are there any other questions for Alicia?
Yeah, I have another question.
Sure.
I usually grow my herbs in a horse trough.
In a horse trough?
It's fairly big. It's at my waist level, so it's easy for me to get around. But over the years, some of the dirt has sunk down, and I have asparagus plants in that trough too. Asparagus plants.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I'm trying to figure out, how do I add soil to that and not screw up my asparagus plants?
Well, probably what you're going to have to do, it's possible that you could put a shovel deep enough under the roots and add the soil from the bottom. But what you may have to do is take them out and divide them and transplant them back, add the soil and put them back.
Because I still have a lot of herbs on one end of it.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
You could try putting a shovel underneath, and if you can get a shovel to go in there and lift up a little bit, that would be a tedious method, but you could probably have a little progress that way.
Okay, that sounds possible. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other questions or comments?